right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Turjo Talks. I'm your host, Turjo. Today, we're joined by Jim Zauderer, President and Regional Sales Manager of Zauderer Associates, a manufacturer's representative agency based just outside of Atlanta. Jim has been with the company since 1979, steering it through decades of growth. By the way, I just read 1979, so you started when you were 3? Steering it through decades of growth since its founding by his father, Charles Zauderer, in 1954. Under this leadership, the company relocated to Georgia in 2019 and now serves customers across the U.S. east of the Mississippi River, southern Canada, and nationwide for some products. Jim oversees sales in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and Tennessee, bringing deep expertise in the manufacturing industry. With a commitment to integrity and top-notch customer service, he's built lasting relationships. You would never last if you didn't do that. We're thrilled to have you share your insights on the show. Thank you so much.
It's great to be with you.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Turjo.
This is a lot. You got to tell me, who are you, man? You're doing all these crazy things out there and serving the community. What do you do? What does Jim do?
Well, our company is in manufacturing. So we're a sales group that is selling custom component parts to companies that are called OEMs that make finished products. And that finished product can be a car, it can be an airplane, it can be a defense-related product, it can be an athletic product, it could be in the filter industry, the trucking industry, it could be in the petroleum industry.
Right.
So we basically represent a range of metal and plastic components that are all highly engineered and made to blueprint for these companies that are building these finished products.
Awesome. So, let's dive in a little bit. Give an example of a finished product that you do that the consumer or the audience would know over here that's relevant.
Well, if you go into a Home Depot, for example, you'll go to a section of Home Depot where they have like roofing products, and there's these grids that look like it's expanded metal that goes up on the gutter to keep leaves out of your gutter.
Yeah.
That was something that was invented by a guy that I met a long time ago. It turned into a gigantic business, selling to Home Depot, Lowe's, all the home centers. Cool. Kind of a do-it-yourself type product and all.
Right.
But we sell to the automotive industry where we sell plastic injection molded parts that might go in the fuel area of the car, or we sell to the aircraft industry where we might sell cabling that might, that affects the flaps and all the controls inside an aircraft.
Right.
We sell product that goes into operating rooms. It's like a drape that covers the robotic surgery equipment.
Wow.
And then after the surgery, all that draping's taken off. They put new draping on to keep the operating room clean. Right. And so things like that. It's such cool. Like in the defense industry, I sold to a company that was making the cluster bombs, and we were selling a plastic component that basically created 400 little parachutes so that when the cluster bomb opened, these 400 little parachutes with smaller bombs on them would come out, called bomblets. And so that was that. And then there was one where we supplied that same material in the sonar buoy industry, where when the aircraft carrier group is moving around the world, they drop these sonar buoys into the ocean to protect the fleet. And they're basically looking for submarines that might be approaching the fleet.
So Zauderer Associates, are you guys actually manufacturing these materials, or you're selling to manufacture to get it in production? For companies.
We sell for companies that are called job shops that basically have an expertise in one area. Like it might be injection molding plastic, it might be extruding plastic, it might be extruding aluminum, it might be roll forming steel parts, it might be stampings. And then we sell for them to the finished user, which is the OEM that takes our component along with maybe 100 other components from other companies, and they assemble them together to make a finished product.
That is incredible.
So we're in between. We're the guys that find the jobs, and we're selling for the guys that have expertise in one particular area.
So you have both in manufacturing and sales, really, and combining the two.
Exactly.
That is amazing. And you named some companies that are really hard to get into. A good friend of mine, Bob Nardelli, the ex-CEO of Home Depot. Tough guys to crack there and to get into the shelf. So kudos to you for cracking that. I mean, that's difficult.
Yeah. It's hard. Typically, the types of products that we sell have tooling involved with them, and some tooling could be $50,000 or it could be $5 million.
Yeah, it depends on what it is.
But once the company invests in that tooling, they're going to buy from you for the length of or the life of that product.
Right.
So typically, the life of a product might run 5 years, could run 7 years, and then at that point, they may redesign, and then they have to build a new tool.
New tool again, yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at in the process.
And as far as the job shops or the manufacturing part, are you guys just national or is it international, global?
We were basically just in the Northeast for a while. Then we expanded to the Southeast, then to the Midwest. And then, but now we sell all over the United States, actually. And we actually sell to Asia, and we sell to Europe too. And we're bringing some products in from Europe and from Asia that we just can't get in the United States anymore.
Right. But most of the products are here in the United States.
Because that's a process that I've seen in my lifetime. Most of the manufacturing was in the northern part of the United States, but because of higher taxes up there or because of the labor situations with the unions, a lot of those companies moved south, and where you had right to work states, and these companies could basically evade having to have a union involved to keep their costs down. But then once they came to the South, then they moved to the Caribbean because the taxes started getting higher in the South, or the union contracts started coming in again. And then they went to Mexico, and then they went from Mexico to China, and now China is exporting their products to Vietnam and Thailand. And so basically manufacturing is following the cheapest labor. Right. And it's kind of a race to the bottom.
Efficiency and all that stuff. Plays a role into it. I promised I'm not going to get into politics prior to starting this, but how does the tariff situation play here?
Well, the tariff is, there's a lot of debate where a lot of people say that it's not a tax on the American people. But in my case, when I bring in product, say from China, and they get hit with 100% tariff, it doubles my cost.
It does.
I can't absorb that.
No.
So I have to pass that on to the customer.
Correct.
And the customer is going to pass it on to his customer, and eventually the consumer is going to wind up paying for it.
Right.
So the incentive there is, once the tariffs get so high, is for Americans to find a way in the United States to make that product cheaper than they can bring it in with the high tariffs. And that's the incentive that's being created there. Right. But as far as the immediate effect, when I get a big increase like that, I have to pass it on to my customer, and so it just gets passed down to the consumer. And so it does kind of end up being a tax on the American people.
And then the other thing that I realized with any kind of government regulation that comes abrupt and random is the skepticism to deal with it, because the unknown, the fear, right? It creates a big market loop. How are you guys dealing with that now?
Well, businesses have to be able to plan their capital, and they have to plan their inventories, and they have to plan their personnel years in advance. Right. And when you just throw a curveball at them to where everything changes on a dime, companies can't, they cannot react to that. So basically, in the 90s, I saw when NAFTA came in, and all of a sudden it was cheaper to where you could manufacture in Mexico, and you didn't have the tariff to bring it back into the United States because it was like free trade. Yeah, all the big corporations, the Fortune 500, all went to Mexico, and so a lot of my customers went to Mexico. So we started shipping product down into Mexico.
Right, basically Mexico City was created around that time. I mean, what do we see? What Mexico City has become now?
Exactly. So on a lot of my trips down to Mexico, I kept thinking, if somebody would come down here with a video camera and take a movie of all the Fortune 500 companies that now have brick and mortar down here, there were millions of jobs lost in the United States that went to Mexico because the government decided to sign the tariff, NAFTA. Right. So that was just a government program. And then it really created a lot of unintended consequences, which a lot of government programs do, where in Mexico, there really was not a big, strong middle class down there because they didn't have the jobs that they could pay. Right. So when you look at the drug trafficking that was going on in Mexico, all of that was coming to the United States.
Right.
Now, once you had all of these high-paying jobs in Mexico, where you had 2 million people, now you had a drug market in Mexico.
Yeah, they could afford it right there.
So it created a fight with the cartel. The 6 families in Mexico started fighting with each other down there, and it created a drug war in Mexico.
Wow.
So drugs still come into the United States, but now there's all those cartels in Mexico are fighting for that turf down in Mexico.
Right.
So it actually became very dangerous to go down there, to travel down there. And I've been down there probably 30 or 40 times visiting customers.
No, I know that for a fact because I used to own some stations around Laredo. Been there many times. Never knew what it was till, you go there and you're like, this is dangerous, right?
Yep.
But everyone kind of echoed the same thing you said. It was that once that had passed, the free trade was almost so free where you could move product in and out so easily.
Yep.
Drug trade became such a big thing, and human trafficking and all that stuff.
Right,
I mean, it just became so unsafe. Yeah. Yep. I mean, McAllen and all that, just became cities where you cannot live there anymore.
Exactly.
Because of that, of the government, call mandates. It's terrible.
Somebody told me one time that news travels east and west. It doesn't travel north and south. And when you think about it,
that's so true.
We don't really hear much about South America or about Latin America or Mexico. We don't hear much about Africa.
Yeah.
Most of our news is about Asia, United States, and Europe.
Yeah.
So it's traveling. The news basically travels east to west. But there's a lot going on in South America, and there's a lot going on in Africa, and there's China is investing a lot of money in Africa right now.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, a lot.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Natural resources and everything that you have. Especially the whole EV trade and all the, natural resources they have there in the mineral rights. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So it is difficult to do, what do you do on a daily basis for a long time now, but it is a lot harder to take it from your father, right? Give me that dynamic. How difficult, or was it easy? What was your experience on that?
Well, he actually became ill and passed away in 1987.
Sorry to hear
so
that.
I was kind of forced into taking control of the company at that point. But he actually taught sales in college up in New York at NYU and some places like that. He was one of the first pioneers of the manufacturer's representative.
Got it.
Because before that dynamic came on board, companies would just have their own salaried salespeople.
Got it.
So they would just pay somebody full time to go out and sell their product.
Right.
But when the manufacturer's rep came along, it's like, well, you just have to pay us for what we sell.
Right.
So if we bring in $1 million account, you pay us a commission on that.
Right.
So they didn't have this overhead. So these companies
you only
started.
Pay me when I perform.
You only pay me when I perform.
That's a great idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the whole manufacturer's rep industry kind of exploded from like the 1960s to now. So there's a lot of manufacturers reps out there now.
And you still don't hear much about it. Like, this is new to me. I'm learning as I go. And I've been in business for a long time, and it's still not, the normal human, I guess, just doesn't know about it much.
Yeah. And it's just like anything else. It's like everything goes through a progression.
Yeah.
And if you don't stay up with the technology that's coming through, you kind of get left behind.
Yeah, if you're standing still, you're moving backwards, right?
So, I can remember when the fax machine came in and everybody thought, the technology here is amazing.
Right.
And then when the internet first started, it was like, are you kidding me? There's like, what is this, know?
It's never going to work.
Yeah, it's never going to work. But the people that ignored it kind of like got left behind. And so we as an agency, as a sales and marketing agency for manufacturers, we continue to stay up with all the latest techniques and tricks of the trade to try to make sure that we can find the sales for the people that we're selling for and that they can find us.
Right.
So we're using AI quite a bit.
And the other thing that I could appreciate for someone like yourself and representing these manufacturers is that you're not just a sales source or force. You are also market research, right? Because you're doing all these market research. You're seeing a lot more than me as a manufacturer that would see by myself. Correct. Because I'm kind of in my own silo, building or have a tool. I'm tooling whatever product. Let me stay in my lane, and you're more of a partner on that market R&D kind of stuff. Am I saying that accurately?
No, you're absolutely correct. So there's a lot of research that we do in order to find those markets.
Right.
Like, for an example, like if we find a new application in a new product, typically we'll go out. There's 600,000 manufacturers in the United States right now, and about 16, 17 million people working in the manufacturing field.
Right.
And those are typically higher paying jobs.
Right.
But if we find a new application, then we will go through a lot of the services that we use to try to find maybe 5 or 6 or 7 more similar companies doing the same thing.
Right.
And then we'll approach them to see if we can, interest them in the same type of service or the same type of product.
Yeah, because your whole job, you're researching, you're digging markets all day long, right? How can you make something more efficient?
Exactly.
Right. No one's buying something because you're a pretty face. They're buying it because you could make it better, more efficient, cost effective, whatever it may be.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, sometimes you can save, everybody wants to save money, but they don't want to give up the quality.
Right.
So sometimes you can change the way you're making a part and make it cheaper that way without losing any of the quality.
Yeah.
And if you can accomplish that, then you can sell that process to a lot of people.
Right.
So just because somebody's been doing it the same way for 30 years,
doesn't make it better.
You maybe find a new material or you find a new way to process it, and you can drop the price.
Especially, change in technology and what have you. That brings me to my next, question for you is that, again, you yourself have been doing this for a long time.
Right.
What are some of the headwinds that you faced in the beginning versus now? Because multiple decades and different human culture and the country has evolved so much, not to mention technology. What have you seen through those decades there? I
think the speed at which business operates today, people don't realize it. They've just come into it right now or have come into it in the last 5 to 10 years. But typically when I would go out on a sales, I'd go out for a week.
Right.
In my car, and I would call on all these different factories and these different companies. And during that course of the week, I'd be picking up blueprints, I'd be picking up samples, I'd have to keep them all categorized. And when I'd get back, then I would mail all these to the companies that were going to quote to see if they could get the business, they could pick up the business. So it would take a week for me to pick them up. It would take a week for them to get them in the mail. It would take them a week to quote, and it would take a week to get it back.
A month already.
So a month had passed. Today, I get a call in the morning and they want a price in the afternoon.
Right.
And they can send me the blueprints and they can send me the CAD files.
Yeah.
They can send me everything that we need to quote.
All from your house.
Yeah. And if you can't get an answer back in the same day, I've got people that get upset.
Right.
Get really upset with you. Like, you people aren't very efficient, you know? So, yeah, the speed at which business travels today is like, the speed of light, basically, because that's,
Very good. And you know what? It's funny because I yell at my kids all the time. I'm like, "You're impatient, blah, blah, blah." But you and I are worse, right? Because we're expecting things to come our way too so much quicker now.
Yep.
We have just become kind of part of the culture now where, something simple as an Amazon delivery. If I see it's going to come 2 days from now, I'm like, what in the world next?
Yeah, why is it taking so long?
I want it at 7 in the morning, and I'm like, I don't need it, but it's just expectation now. We have become so accustomed to everything, instant gratification now.
Absolutely.
So how does someone like you, managing a lot of people at the same time, how do you stay up with that? How do you keep up with that speed?
Well, I think it's like the old Chinese proverb, once you mount the tiger, you can't dismount.
Yeah.
So it's a situation where we're in the middle of it.
Right.
I've told my family I haven't had a vacation really in about 5 years. It's just like, because even when you're on vacation, you're still getting text messages, you're still getting emails, you're still getting phone calls. All my men, they're very motivated. They're very on top of things. They're all engineers that are that are good salespeople, and so they just stay on top of everything the best they can. And
I tell people that I don't remember the last time I took a vacation like you. If I had to remember, it's probably been 12 years, 13 years maybe. But I travel with the family all the time. I just work remote. Right?
Yeah.
So we don't take vacations here, working remote.
Yeah.
I'm available 24/7. Half the team doesn't even know I'm not here.
Yeah.
Because they'll text me, email me, whatever. We're always responding immediately.
Exactly.
How do you build your sales force? are they kind of in the same performance-based? How are you doing that?
Yeah, they're all incentivized. Even though they work for Zauderer Associates, they're incentivized because a large part, they get a base salary and then they get commissions on top of that.
Right.
And then Zauderer Associates gets a small percentage of those commissions as well. So if they go out and double their sales, they're going to double their income. If they triple their sales, they're going to triple their income. We've one of the sayings in our business is that we can get fired for two reasons. Either we're doing a bad job or we've done too good of a job. And we've been in several situations where the commission checks get so big that the people just want to get rid of us because they can't write the checks anymore. So you have to have a good contract with the people that you're selling for and make sure you're protected. Right. If on the back end of the deal, somebody decides they just want to cut you loose because they don't want to write those checks anymore.
Wow.
So unfortunately, we've been in a few of those situations. Yeah. And so having a good contract going into your relationship is very important. When my dad first started, it was all handshake.
Yeah.
You would just shake hands with somebody and that was it. A man's word was his bond and you could take that to the bank. But today, everybody has to be protected legally, because there's so much of that going on now where people are suing each other and
even
everything.
the legal contract doesn't do a lot. That's how bad it has been
exactly
out there. And it's one of those things where I love roll-up opportunities, as I told you earlier. I love the service business. I love rolling up opportunities. And it's great and bad at the same time, because part of the American backbone, the American dream, has been hardworking folks that has created great companies, and only thing they knew was how to do it with their hands, commitment, man of their word kind of deal. And you try to buy some of these guys out there, but you run into a problem because only thing they have is word of mouth, handshake deals. And you're trying to buy something that is contract based, but you don't know how to value it because you have that problem so much. Yeah. And a new guy comes in, the contracts are all gone because they just flee. And it's such a dynamic that we're facing in this country. It's difficult.
It is. And a lot of the people that, we had the greatest generation.
Yes.
They grew up in the Depression. They fought in World War II. They came home from World War II and they built the greatest economy in the world.
Ever.
They had the baby boomers, which I'm part of. And then now those men and women that built those great companies, they've reached the age where now that if they don't pass it on to their children, they're selling those companies.
And they have to sell.
Yeah. And so these venture capital companies are coming in and they're buying up these manufacturing companies, and they'll come in and they'll do a few things and then they'll flip the company. And so there's a lot of that's going on. There's a lot of mergers going on, and there's a lot of buyouts going on.
In every industry possible.
So, and really manufacturing is the backbone of this country.
Of course.
Agriculture is a backbone. Manufacturing is where the wealth has been built in this country. So it's important, and that's what this administration is trying to do right now. They're trying to bring manufacturers back to the United States, and they're trying to find ways to incentivize them to do that. Whether we can do that or we can't, or if we've passed the point of no return on that, I don't know. Time will tell. But yeah, in our business, it's like if you Google, let's see, I forget exactly what the title of it is, but it's about the pencil. And it's basically when you look at a pencil and you say, oh, geez, I bought this pencil for 5 cents. Right. But you look at it, it's got an eraser with rubber in it that was made in Brazil. Yeah. It's got copper in it that was mined in Africa. It's got wood ash in it that was cut down in Canada. You've got graphite in it that was made, that was taken out of a mine somewhere else in the world, maybe Australia. Yeah. And all of these products are brought together and manufactured into that pencil in high volume. And the company that's making that pencil, even though it's only selling for 5 cents each or 10 cents each, they're making money at it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And so
volume.
Yeah. So manufacturing is where you can bring raw materials together and process them, create a finished product, and that's where you're going to build wealth.
Yeah, and it's scary at the same time, because to your point, and I always question this myself, we're not the world's most resourceful country, natural resources I'm talking about. We don't have the most population. There's a lot of things that, we're not number one on. So what does America have? And the way I always answered it to my kids or whoever is that we have the most hardworking people.
Yep.
No one outworks Americans.
Right.
And it's not just nice to say, it's factual. You go on a vacation somewhere, you go outside the country and they're like, you guys are crazy. Right. And the other thing that we have is innovation through agriculture, through manufacturing, whatever. But if you get rid of those two things, what are you left with?
Yeah. We're a service economy.
Yeah. Right. And we are consumers. We are builders. We are creators. We don't have anything else. That's what we do. But if you take those two things away, that's why China and all these things have been such a great threat to us.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I'm excited about, again, that this administration's attempting to do is the president signed an executive order that basically is opening up all of the federal land where they can do mining.
That's right.
And there's been an estimate that is worth about $150 trillion dollars.
Right.
So,
thing that we never knew, by the way.
Right.
You never heard that before.
No, you never heard that before. Right. So basically all the companies like Caterpillar, Cummins Engine, all these big companies and a lot of smaller ones too, those companies are going to have to crank out more front-end loaders. They're going to have to crank out more excavators. They're going to have to do a lot of different things to go into this federal land and mine this stuff out of the land, which is rare earth minerals and all the minerals that we need to support the United States manufacturing.
And less depend on the world.
And the rest of the world.
Right.
So if that becomes successful, we could see a real rebirth of maybe not the same manufacturing, but different manufacturing. We can see a kind of a rebirth of manufacturing in the United States.
I think it's incredible.
Which would be fantastic.
And think about also, and some of the unintended consequences you had mentioned earlier, both good and bad. But something like this happens. What does that do to the middle class of America and the hardworking folks out there? Changes everything.
Yep.
Talk about job demand and what have you. I mean, it changes everything.
Right.
Instant.
Right.
You don't have to rely on anything else at that point. I mean, the economy should be booming at that point.
Yeah, one thing a lot of people didn't, I remember doing an interview with Plastic News about 25 years ago, and I was telling them that we're at a point where we have to make a decision as Americans, as consumers. Are we willing to pay more for a product to keep the business in the United States? Or are we wanting to buy the cheapest product we can buy, whether it's a shirt or whether it's a car or whether, no matter what it is? And the American people never really made that decision, but really and truly, they vote with their wallet.
Right.
And in order to support their family, they want to buy things that are less expensive. So basically, all these plants started leaving the United States and going to Mexico, like we talked about earlier, or going to China. But when you think about it, just take one plant for an example. Let's say that you and I have the capital and we've decided that we're going to put a plant somewhere in the world. We're Americans and we're looking at land, say in Indiana.
Right.
And if we put that plant in Indiana, it's going to create 2,000 jobs, let's say.
Right.
So we decide, we look at the economics and we say, well, if we put it there, we'll make 5% profit at the end of the day. If we put it in Mexico, we'll make 20% profit. So instead of putting that plant there, so if that plant goes into Indiana, you have the excavation and all the people that are going to do that. Then you have all the builders that are going to come in and build the plant. Then you've got all the support system in that community that's going to support the plant, whether it's food or whatever the services are needed. And you're going to have 2,000 people that are going to work there that can now support their families.
Which is about 6,000 to 7,000 people minimum.
Exactly.
From just there. Yeah.
Exactly. But because we decide to put it in Mexico, that's not going to happen in Indiana. It's going to happen in Mexico.
Right.
And now they're going to get the benefit of that.
Right.
So how do we get to the point in our country to where people like you and I or somebody that wants to make that investment invest in the United States?
Right.
And you have to do, you have to create incentives for people to do that, which is lower taxes,
less government
regulation, and do the things that are going to attract the people.
Right.
Try to do things that are going to make them want to come here.
Correct.
Instead of poking them with a stick until they say, I don't want to get poked anymore. I'm leaving. I'm gone.
And the biggest thing that I've seen over my time, and it's unfortunate. Again, I'm not picking sides versus who did better, and you're not either here. But it's become such a thing in this country where someone does well and they become the evil character, right? Like part of that is that, I'm all for what you just said earlier. And I love what you said, because I could argue, and you and I think both agree on this one, is that if you put that plant in Indiana, even though the margins are less, the over long-term effect is way more, higher quality, higher, all of this stuff. But the problem is that because we decided to do it here, you're going to be the bad person also.
Right.
Now the government has done such a bad job, or a good job, it depends on how you look at it, on painting them with that brush of, just because you're successful, you're the evil guy, you're taken away, you're not.
Exactly.
That just becomes such a thing in this country.
Yeah.
You need to get over that hump. It's a cultural shift.
Right.
It's a mindset.
Right. And going back to that same example, if you take an existing plant, say in Indiana, that's building cars or building components for cars, and they shut that plant down and move it, now you have 2,000 families that cannot pay their mortgage. Now all of a sudden you have a real estate crunch that hits that town.
Right.
And now people's houses go down in value.
All their life savings.
For
most Americans.
Yeah. And I could drive you right now to Indiana or Ohio, Michigan, and I could drive you by plant after plant after plant that are just sitting there in mothballs right now. Weeds coming up through the parking lot where there used to be 1,000 cars parked every day.
Right.
And they're just sitting there idle because all of those jobs went down south of the border.
Yeah, and I could bring you, Detroit as an example.
Exactly.
Right. Like especially during the pandemic, I owned real estate in all these markets we're talking about, but Ohio and stuff. First that happens, then happens crime.
Right.
And that happens poverty, then happens drug use. And,
right.
And I could name it. I'm talking about generational damage happens from just those quick, think about Detroit in 2008.
That's right.
What has happened?
That's right. That's why, like I heard years ago, a good friend of mine, we talked about him earlier, from Buffalo, New York, Jack Kemp. He played in the NFL, and then he was a congressman for a long time. He came up with an idea for the inner city called enterprise zones, where you would get manufacturers to move their plants inside the inner cities of the country.
Right.
Now, once you have the plant there, you've got jobs there, you have opportunity there, you create hope.
Right.
And once you have hope, then people, think differently.
Strive to do more.
Think totally different. But if you don't have the jobs there, people lose hope, and then they'll turn to other things that are not productive.
Right.
So there's a way that we can create incentives for people in every situation, and it just seems like it's a simple process, but there's just so much resistance. So,
it's incredible. Yeah. If you had to go back 20, 30 years ago, what advice would you give yourself now on how to train these guys, different salespeople? And how would you pitch that differently to a manufacturer?
Well, I think we all need to continually educate ourselves. But I think as you look at the colleges today, I think where people are going to do the best as far as their livelihood is going to technical colleges like Georgia Tech, MIT, Caltech, Rensselaer Polytech, Virginia Tech. Schools like that are going to produce engineers. Engineers are needed so badly. There's like a 300,000 engineer shortage in the United States right now.
Right.
And so those people will be paid a premium, when they're hired at these manufacturing plants. So I think the STEM is really big.
I think so.
The kids need to go in that direction. The other area too is maybe not going to college, but going to the technical trade schools.
I agree.
Because I know a lot of men, throughout my life that have built incredible companies. Whether it's in plumbing or heating and air conditioning.
And the amount of money you could make today and help out by being it's such a dying art.
Yep.
You don't hear any kids anymore want to be a plumber or HVAC tech or whatever, but you could make so much money quickly, and you could build substantial companies too, because those guys are being acquired by the large PE groups and all that.
That's true.
And you're losing the touch.
That's right. That's right. So going back, I would just say not to be as resistant to change, to embrace change when it comes. Right. Don't fight it. And instead of making the change 3 years later, try to get into it right away. Right. Try to take advantage of those changes that are coming. But I think if I had to say that I made some mistakes in my past, it was always like whenever there was a change coming in the industry, we'd say, well, I don't know if that's really going to take or not. And so you didn't get into it. The guys that did get into it early, they took advantage of it. Right. I remember going to Arkansas. There was, back when the satellite dishes were 10 feet in diameter. Yeah. The reason for that was because the satellite dishes was because the satellites were weak. They didn't have a strong signal, so they had to have a bigger diameter dish. So there was 4 plants in Arkansas that built these dishes.
What part of Arkansas?
It was in Bentonville. Okay. It was going up the corridor from Little Rock.
I spent a lot of time in Arkansas. That's why I asked.
I'm trying to think.
From El Dorado to Pocahontas, you name Arkansas. I've probably been there, like middle of nowhere.
But the real interesting thing is, as we went to each one of and each plant had about 2,000 employees. Right. I mean, they were big operations. Big ups, but you talk to the president and you'd say, well, have you heard about these small dishes coming in? Oh, those dishes nobody's ever going to go to those dishes and all. But what they didn't realize is that the satellites that were in orbit were getting stronger. Right. And so the signal was stronger. Yeah. The dishes didn't need to be so big. Yeah. And so the only guys that survived were the ones that embraced the small dish. And the guys that went to that, they really prospered. The other guys went out of business. So that's an example, even in manufacturing.
Right. And speed to market matters, right? Because once you get, I'm sure you see this, where once you make a deal happen or you sell a product to, or build a relationship, that's what you're really selling. It's hard to change that relationship. Yep. Change is hard for everyone, like you said earlier. Exactly. So relationship changes are difficult too. So the guys that got into the front end of it, that's pioneers, if you would.
That's right.
People jumped in and they don't want to change after that.
Yep.
What are you seeing the next revolution? I'm assuming it's going to be AI. And if that's your answer, how does someone like me I don't even know what that means even. All I know is that it's everywhere on my phone, it's everywhere on my laptop. How does someone, an old school player, embrace that?
Well, I think in manufacturing, what's happening is that AI and robotics together are changing a lot in the manufacturing field. Because if you can't lower the labor rates and you can't lower the regulations and you have to lower your costs, then you have to take labor out completely. Right. So if you go into a lot of the modernization of these plants around the country right now, you're going to see these big robots that are doing all the work in the plant. And there's going to be more and more of that. And people are going to lose jobs because of that. But it's the only way people can stay in the United States and keep their costs low. Right. Now, everything is not, you can't put robots on everything. Right. And you're still going to have people that are going to understand how to run the robots and how to repair the robots and do all that. So there's still going to be a lot of jobs associated with that. But AI is changing everywhere. It's changing the software, is the way you communicate, the way you can draw up a blueprint. Right. You're going to eliminate a lot of the people that are programming because of AI. Right. AI is going to make a big impact.
That's huge, yeah.
And it's into everything. Right. It's
everyday life, that is. Yeah, everything we do. Yeah. The way we think, we do anything, product advertising, whatever you name it.
Like everybody gets calls on their phone. Yeah. It aggravates the heck out of them. Yeah. That's AI. Yeah. That's just in there. That's like a little robot that's running in that program that's going from one phone number to the next phone number to the next phone number.
Instead of a human making 50 calls a day, now AI could do 1,000 calls a day because it's emotionless.
Yeah. So there might be, 20 years ago, there was a call center in Texas or Mexico or in India or in China or something, and you'd hire 2,000 people to do that. All those people are not needed anymore because now you can just have a computer program that just ties in all the phone calls.
All the text messages we're getting now. Yeah. Annoying as hell, but it's AI.
Yeah.
But you said something earlier in this context, which I appreciate here. Yes, robots cannot replace you still need someone to manage the robots and all that. But again, to people that are always about higher wages and stuff, it hurts them that's cheering for that more than anyone. But now you have a higher level employee, the one that went to an MIT, a Georgia Tech, premium guys that's managing. But your hourly wage employees, your guys that are getting their hands dirty, those are being replaced. Yep. And people don't see that again. And you and I touched on this earlier. Sometimes the messaging sounds great. And look, I'm an advocate. I'm sure you are too. Of $1,000 an hour, if that was reality, $5,000. Name your price.
Sure.
Great. Everyone flourishes. It sounds amazing. But I just saw something the other day with this New York City candidate, a mayor candidate. He was advocating for $30 an hour, which again, make it $300 an hour, $500. I would love to see a day where we all thrive as population. It's great. You could argue $50,000 an hour. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But $30 an hour, it's amazing to hear, but it's no different than tariffs. It's worse. Right. Someone's got to pay for that.
Right.
The consumer ultimately pays for that. What happens to your rent now? What happens to, and when a corporation sees that, hey, a manufacturing job requires $30 an hour when I used to pay $8 an hour. What do they do with that job now? They replace it.
Right. Exactly.
And I think, to your point, robotics is probably a major change in both efficiency and a threat to this lower level, wage earners too.
Right. And behind the scenes, behind all of what we're talking about, if you go to the doctor's going to check your blood, because you have to have good blood running through your body, or else you're going to have problems. Right. The blood of an economy is the currency. Right. It's the money.
Of course.
If you go back to 1913, a dollar was worth $1 in purchasing power. Yeah. Today, it's worth 2 cents.
Yeah.
So what's happened is,
and changing quickly.
Exactly. So the price of things are not going up. The value of the dollar is going down, which it takes a while to get your head wrapped around that. And nothing is changing that, because the government continues to run these giant deficits. Yeah. And those deficits are going to cause them to have to print money that we don't have, that we're not bringing in with tax dollars. Right. So there's going to be this increased pressure to tax companies. People look at these big corporations and they figure they're just, that's a good target to tax. Yeah,
they're evil. They're making all the money. They're bad. Yeah. All the same all. Yeah.
Tax people that are making money, that are productive, this, that, and the other. But you're basically, when you do that, you're basically killing the goose that's laying the golden egg. Right. So it's it sounds good emotionally. Yeah. It sounds good politically.
Again, it's a feel good.
Yeah, it's a feel good kind of thing. Yeah. But so, like, when you go back to the money, it's like, I remember when I was a kid, people were buying houses for $20,000, $30,000. Those houses today are selling for $2 million. It's not because the houses became more valuable, because the money, the dollars have become so weak as far as the purchasing power.
I 100% agree. And it's funny because people are like, my house is worth this much more now. And I'm like, is it?
Yeah,
I would argue that your money's worth so much less now.
Yeah,
because the replacement cost of that is the same thing. It's just the way you look at it.
Yeah,
I agree 100% with you.
So manufacturers are up against a lot of things. They have a lot of obstacles, and yet we as consumers demand to have all these products. So who's going to make them? Right. Who's going to make these products?
It's such a tough industry, right? Because, and I appreciate you educated me a lot today about this, because I'm very ignorant to it. I just don't know any better. But it is the only industry that you think about universally, this manufacturing industry, is that as a consumer, I will never sacrifice the quality, but I want a better price. Typically, those things don't go hand to hand.
No.
Right? But if I'm buying a luxury product, I'm willing to pay $5,000 for the new Chanel or Louis Vuitton bag.
Sure.
Because the marketing was done so right. But I'm talking about sheer manufacturing.
Right.
It's the only industry that you think about, and it touches everything, obviously. It's the only one that we expect better at lower price. Why is that?
I think it's because we've seen it happen in our lifetime.
Right.
It's because of manufacturing. Right. Because of assembly
efficiencies
lines. Efficiencies and new materials, new processes continue to allow us to cut down on the cost.
Right.
But at some point, you reach a point of, where you're like diminishing returns. And there's so many things that we're kind of reaching. We're sort of reaching a point where we just feel like something's got to give, you know? But I know that manufacturers are a very committed group out there.
Yeah.
They're very hardworking people. The owners of these companies are very hardworking. What bothers me a little bit is that if you go back 50 years, the owners of most companies were individuals.
Right.
Today, the owners of a lot of companies are investment companies.
Large, yeah.
And so they may own the company, but they don't even know what the company's doing.
No.
The people at the top, they understand the numbers. They understand what the numbers are telling them as far as the profits and all.
Right.
But they never really get down to the, where, like I know this one company and they had like 1,000 employees, and the guy that owned the company, every day he would show up and he would get on his bicycle and he would ride through the entire plant, and he knew everybody's name in that plant. And he came there 7 days a week. He knew everything that was happening there.
Right.
But then I know other companies to where they say, well, someone from corporate came down. They've been here for 5 years, and they didn't even know we were doing this, and this. And it's like they're completely, but that's not what they're interested in.
Right.
What they're interested in is just give me the bottom number.
Right.
Just tell me what the performance is.
Right.
But I don't want to know what we're doing out in the plant.
Right.
So that's how things have changed a lot in the country.
I couldn't agree with you more. So we found it recently. And it's more of a passion project than anything else, an advisory firm, where we do the same thing, where we're connecting these exiting companies with large buyers and large exits, right? Mm-hmm. So we're helping them achieve that goal. So in doing that, we just visited a large company that I'm not going to name right now, but South Georgia. And we went and visited this. And for me, I don't take any client on. I don't talk to anyone unless I visit, like, for example, right now, I just, we signed up a car wash company, and I went to, Nashville, rented a car, ran it through the car wash myself because I want to see all of it before we even take on. Yeah, because if it's something that I don't believe in, I don't want to sell it. So this manufacturing company, I go in and I look at this and it hits exactly what you just said. The person that owned it, family owned for a long time, now they're getting to a point where the next generation is like, Dad, it's not sexy. It's not cool.
Exactly.
Right? I can't do this. So this new company is trying to buy it. And guess what the first thing they have done?
What?
So one company just bought it, put a commitment on it. First thing they did is that they redesigned a special corridor, right? And the corridor goes about maybe 1,000 feet, less maybe. It's not a huge one or anything. And they have done it where it's air conditioned, because right now to go from one facility to another one, you have to walk.
Oh, wow.
And the guys that wanted to buy it wanted to put a golf cart service.
Oh, wow.
But it gets hot in Georgia, so golf carts get hot. From the founder visiting the sites every day, and their house was walking distance, built a major house there, but lived on the property basically so they could see their employees. So the new company that's in talks to buying it, spending $30 million on this corridor.
Oh my goodness!
Air condition.
Wow.
And making like a museum, and plush in 1,000 feet, spending $30 million. That's their budget. Wow. Because when their corporate honchos come in, they could go through that corridor.
Wow.
But that's the big difference in what was once, what is becoming.
Exactly.
And they're doing every projections they have done, everything is through a financial model, and that's it. There's no human involvement, because they're like, oh, these guys will show up to work.
Yeah, getting to know your employees and motivating them.
Yeah.
I was at a plant in Arkansas, a town called Magnolia, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. There was an aluminum extrusion plant that we sold for, and it was a big plant, multi-million square foot plant. So anyway, Sam Walton came because he was going to be buying a bunch of aluminum extrusions for his truck fleet. So we were with him. He walks into the office, into the reception area, and everybody's walking through the reception area to go into the offices. And he stops And he walks over to the receptionist and he says, you know what? He says, you're the most important person in this whole business.
By far.
He says, because you're the face, you're the voice, you're the person that everybody's going to associate with this company when you answer the telephone.
You'll touch more people than the CEO will ever touch.
Exactly. Yeah. And everybody was just standing there looking and all. But to me, that was a big lesson to me, to show me that the reason that he is successful is because he doesn't take anybody for granted.
No.
He was a guy, he was driving the same pickup truck he'd owned for 30 years. Could he afford $1 million pickup truck? Sure. Right. But he was driving the same truck because it worked and it got him from point A to point B.
Right.
But he was just he was down to basics, blocking, tackling, these are the things you do to be successful.
A great example, because look, when Sam Walton built this thing, he got in, visited every store, every day,
exactly.
All of that, right?
Yeah.
If you remember, at the same time, Kmart came out, and Kmart took money from private equity. This is back when private equity, nobody even knew what that was.
Right.
Kmart went hockey stick curve growth. Walmart was just not growing, and look where we are now.
Yeah.
Kmart went bankrupt.
Yeah.
Several times.
The old turtle and tortoise.
And I think Walmart did decent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're doing okay for themselves.
Wow.
I think they've
done phenomenal.
Yeah. Their least successful child is worth, I think, $120 billion or something, or whatever, some number that I cannot count.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's incredible. So what's your advice to the next generation? How can they, do more and do better here?
I think anybody, going to college right now really needs to think about the job market out there and where where they're going to get the most bang for their buck. Right. And again, to me, STEM is the key. I think we need to be teaching our kids in high school, even starting in elementary school, more science, math. We need to educate these kids to compete with the rest of the world, but to be those kind of students that can then go on to these colleges where they can get those engineering degrees and maybe get their master's in engineering and maybe get a PhD or whatever. But at the same time, if that's not your thing, definitely think about, going into a trade and learning those trades, work for somebody else for a while and then get in your own business, start your own company. And, but after you've spent 8 or 10 years learning the trade, whether it's heating and air or whatever, I'll tell you one thing, the heating and air conditioning business, we've supplied that for a long time.
Great business, yeah.
And it never has a recession.
No.
Never, because people always want to be cool.
Yeah,
and in the winter they always want to be warm.
Yeah,
so,
I say the same thing about the gas station business. Which I'm really a part of. When we're recession proof, and the reason I say that is that when things get bad, people smoke, drink, and play more lottery. When things get good, guess what? They do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? For the education too, and I tell people, I'm like, look, not everyone has to be an engineer or whatever. You're an artist. I get that, right? If you're going to study German folk music, great. Just don't spend, $50,000 a year doing that.
Exactly.
Exactly. There's no reason for paying for that. That's all.
It's a good hobby.
Great, wonderful, and good for you.
Yeah.
I'm not the one to judge on what you shouldn't do.
Right.
But there's an ROI in everything we do in life.
Yeah. But everything in life is a choice.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're here and I'm here right now is because of hundreds of choices that we made in the last month and thousands of choices we made in the last year and millions of choices we made in our life.
Nothing's a coincidence, right? It's the choices that leads up to it.
Yeah. So I think, to young people, I would say don't be afraid to make a choice, but think about your choices and think about, is this getting me closer to where I want to be?
Right.
Or is this taking me in a different direction? And be thoughtful about those choices, because you're going to look back on your life and you're going to look back 5 years or whatever. You're going to go, that choice that I made right there, it changed everything in my life.
100%.
Either for the good or for the bad. So
everything has a consequence.
Yeah. Right? So just be thoughtful about the choices you're making, especially about your career.
I agree.
Yeah.
You're in a high intense environment as far as, sales. What do you do personally to keep your guys motivated? Because some days are really bad, some days are really good. Sales is vicious, right? We live off the next deal.
You want to congratulate them. Part of being a good leader is to try to, make them feel empowered.
Right.
people want to know they're doing a good job more than they want to make more money.
For sure.
Because we've had a lot of principals come to us and say, well, we'll pay you guys instead of this percent, we'll pay you double that percent. And then they step back thinking, well, that's going to double our sales. But it didn't, because our guys were already motivated before that.
Right.
What would motivate them more is like if they're brought to a sales meeting and they're given an award or something like that, then when they leave, that meeting, that they go back and they just feel more excited about getting out there and working for that company.
Right.
So it's not always money that motivates people, but if you're in a situation where like you're on a commission basis, you're already motivated because you're out there working hard to try to make the sale so you can get the commission to begin with.
Right.
So we try to hire people that are already motivated, because it's hard to take someone who's not motivated and turn them into a highly motivated person. Right. It can happen, but it's better to find those people that are more competitive.
Do you think commission-only sales rep, you're kind of born with it or you're not? Or, because you could make a lot of money in sales. The problem is that the leap of faith is really difficult. And I could respect that. You're a family of 4 now, and you're leaving everything behind, a good cushion career, whatever that income may be, to jump into all commission. What advice do you give them to make that choice or don't make that choice?
You mean my employees?
Or anyone in general. Again, I know I could, because sales is one of those things, like you said earlier, that if you double your sales, you double your commission, triple, and you kind of,
Exactly.
there's no ceiling. But now I'm kind of in between, right? I want to jump in, but I don't, because it's scary on both sides. What motivation, or what would you tell me to, hey, Turjo, jump in or don't jump in, and here's the reason why?
Yeah, well, don't ever be afraid to try something new or to make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes, and you learn from them, and you get more experience. You get a little bit smarter. You get a little bit more wary. No, I just. We used to say that we're kind of like, being a manufacturer's rep, you're kind of like the last American cowboy. Because it's like, the cowboy would just go out there, and if he's going to go out and try to catch a horse, he could go in any direction he wants.
Yeah, you never know.
Go find the horse and lasso it, bring it back.
Right.
When we get up in the morning, we can point our car in any direction we want to go. We can call anybody we want to call. All of our guys are self-motivated, but they plan their own day. They have their own calendars, and there's only so many hours in a week, so we want to be as productive as we can. Right. And that's one of the things in life too, is like, if you're in a business to where you're making, say, this glass, and you can, and let's say you're doing it with labor to where you're heating up glass and you're creating this shape. Right. Maybe you can make 20 a day. Right. But if you figure out how to turn that into a process to where you can make 300 a day by making it automated, and then buying another machine, and now you can make 600 a day. Right. If you use your body from the neck down, people used to say you're worth $1 a day. Yeah. If you use from the neck up, there's no limit to how much you can make. Right. I remember when there was a guy that put together the Garth Brooks concert in New York. Do you remember when Garth Brooks sang up there? Yeah. That guy did not have a commitment from Garth Brooks or from the city or from anybody. Right. But he went out and he went to the city and he said, I've got Garth Brooks that wants to do a concert here. And he didn't have it. Right. And the city said, sure. And then he went and he went to a money guy and he said, I need the money to fund this thing because I've got the city and Garth Brooks committed. Right. And they said, sure. And they committed to the money. And then he went to Garth Brooks and said, I've got the city, I've got the money, I've got this, that, and the other. Right. All you got to do is sign up for this date. Right. And he put that whole thing together with nothing. Right. So I'm not saying, that it was, maybe the most honest thing that you could do, but he used his ingenuity and he went to each person and he made it happen. Somebody said one time, nothing happens until somebody sells something. Once 100%. You sell something, then all the gears start moving. Everything goes into motion.
A good example is that the founder of Oracle, if you go back to his history, that's how he started his business. He would sell to governments large contracts on a product he never had. But he always believed in that when you make a sale, you got to listen first.
Yep.
So you would go and listen to the problems and said, oh yeah, I have the software, don't worry about it.
Yep.
And then go and find people to make that product because you already pre-sold it.
Yep.
Same thing with the Garth Brooks concert.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And I think people need to be better listeners.
Yeah.
And I think we need to ask questions.
Right.
Whether it's your parents,
right.
Find out everything you can about, your dad's life, your mother's life. Find out everything you can from people that are successful, like you're doing with all these podcasts. Is a great idea because you're going to people and you're pulling information out of a lot of different people in a lot of different areas.
Right. Things I would never know in life.
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic idea what you're doing.
Yeah, it's fun. I have people like you on here, and it's like instant connection.
Maybe not me, but all the other people.
I don't know how you got in here. We never proved you. No, it's just great. No, but honestly, it's been such a pleasure. So, what do you do for fun?
Fun,
you work 23 and a half hours a day only, so you still have half an hour remaining during the day. What do you do in that time?
Well, for a while, I was flying helicopters. I played baseball in an organized baseball league up until about 10 years ago. For about 20 years, I played baseball at Georgia Tech.
Oh, did you really?
I was down there, thought I was going to play professional baseball, but it didn't work out.
Right.
My family is really the most important thing to me.
Right.
My wife and my 4 kids. So I've just poured, my wife and I both have poured everything into our kids.
That's awesome.
And to make sure that they were, confident, educated, that they were good people, that they treated other people the way they would want to be treated.
And where do you live? Do you live right here, around here, Atlanta?
Yeah, we lived in Roswell for about 32 years.
Right.
Before that, we were in Vinings for about 10 years. Great. But we recently sold, and we live out on some property now in Rockmart, Georgia.
Okay, I know exactly where Rockmart is.
Yeah, so I moved my office from New York, the headquarters, down to Rockmart. And we bought an old Regions Bank, moved it in there. So we got offices, we got plenty of room.
Oh, cool.
And we live about 5 miles from the
I don't remember that highway anymore. It's been a long time since I've been to Rockmart.
Hiram?
No, the highway.
Oh, the highway?
The main highway. There's a new raceway that opened up several years ago.
Yep.
So I used to own that Exxon station and the BP on the other side of it.
Yep.
By the new Walmart development, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been to Rockmart.
I've been to Rockmart many times. Yeah.
Well, it's exploding right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're building 400 homes out there, and you've just got a Longhorn Steakhouse.
How about that?
A lot of restaurants are coming in.
Right.
And so it was very quiet, a lot of farming land and all. But just down the road from us, Microsoft just bought 1,000 acres, and they're putting another data center in right there. So it's going to be, amazing. I think there's going to be about 600 employees.
Wow.
And that's AI. That's more AI stuff going in.
Yeah, I don't even know what data centers mean, but I know they're opening up everywhere.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, the Middle East just, the amount of money they put into this country for data centers.
So we just enjoy being around with the kids, and we got 10 grandkids now. So now
10 grandkids.
So now we're raising the grandkids.
How many kids do you have?
I got 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, and then I got 10 grandkids.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got and they're all 2 of them are engineers. One of them is an astrophysicist, and so they're all doing well.
That's
I'm real
great.
Proud of them.
Good for you.
Yeah, very proud of them.
Does any of them work for you? Work with you?
One of them.
Okay, great.
My youngest daughter works for me. Yep.
And do you see her taking the legacy on and taking this company to new heights?
Could be. It all depends on a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, you just don't know how everything's going to play out. So
that is great.
Yeah. So anyway, so everything's working out really well, and the kids are happy and healthy, and the grandkids are healthy. Thing. So yeah, it's all you can ask for.
And the wife still likes you sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
That's perfect. That's more than enough.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out.
Well, thank you for your time.
No, I
appreciate it.
Blast. I'm
pleasure
sure we'll
to meet
be in
you.
touch and stay connected here.
Let's turn this around and let me ask you questions.
All day.
Let me interview you.
Let's do it. No, we'll do that one day. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Okay.
Pleasure.